This ready-to-run Land Cruiser from FMS looks super scale, but there's a few things you should know before buying one. Let's take a closer look at this tiny, or well, maybe not so tiny, Toyota. Most of the FMS products that I've showcased on this channel recently are smaller scale vehicles, ranging from an advertised 1/24th to 1/12th scale. If you're looking for the same high level of detail FMS puts into those smaller scale models, only in a larger size, let me present to you the 1/10th scale Toyota FJ40. Though technically more in the ballpark of a 1/6 or 1/7 scale model, if you're comparing the dimensions to the real thing, the wheelbase and width is pretty close to other popular 10th scale crawler platforms on the market. Here's a little size comparison. Just like with previous FMS products, this truck is officially licensed and comes fully ready to run, though you will need to provide your own batteries for both the truck and transmitter. This truck comes very well packed. So well, in fact, that you'll need to use some care when taking it out, as they've really got it anchored in there tight. I really appreciate the reusable styrofoam case that this truck comes in, great for storage or traveling with this vehicle. I also appreciate the addition of these nice manuals. It will be up to you to install the final accessories such as the side view mirrors and front license plate. Probably needless to say, but this truck looks great. There's tons of detail just about everywhere you look, both on the exterior and interior of this body. The wheels by comparison are a bit of a letdown in my opinion, but that won't be hard to fix. The stock tires aren't bad for general trail driving and maybe even some very mild crawling. Inside there's soft seats with the rears being able to fold up for extra cargo space, a steering wheel that actually turns along with the front wheels thanks to a small servo, though this one was a little crooked out of the box, which I later corrected. Of course, all of the doors open, and the door handles on the front doors are functional, so there should be no worries about them popping open while driving down the trail. Even the window winders rotate, though they do not raise and lower the windows. Maybe someday FMS will figure out a way to implement that. The headlights are functional and have a nice soft warm glow rather than a super bright white or blue colored LED. It's a really nice touch. The body is painted, that's not just bare plastic. Obviously you could enhance the appearance of this vehicle with a new paint job and maybe even some weathering, but for a stock truck right out of the box, it looks great. Under the hood is where you'll find the electronics, and it's where the battery will be placed. Make sure your battery either has a XT60 plug or a suitable adapter. Also ensure the ESC is set up to run the type of battery that you'll be using. It appears that a conventional hard-pack LiPo battery is a little too large. This Helios Shorty pack though fit perfectly, along with some other similarly sized batteries. You can just sort of wedge it down in there, but really not the best battery mounting situation without some modifications. The transmitter is pretty basic and includes a channel 3 3-position switch and a channel 4 button. Neither the third or fourth channel is utilized in stock form, though the channel 3 slot is used to apply power to the front LEDs. There is room for expansion though if you're interested in installing something like a winch. No need to swap out the transmitter and receiver if you don't want to. Underneath you'll find essentially the same chassis used for the Rock Hobby Atlas and Michigan. There's metal frame rails, suspension links, and steering links, and I do like the pretty scale looking drivetrain layout with the front mounted motor and a divorced transfer case. One improvement that I see on this chassis over the Michigan that I own is the inclusion of a front panhard bar in addition to the front forelinks to help eliminate the very present bump steer seen on the Michigan. That's very nice to see, but one thing that's not so nice to see is it appears that these mounts here, that I believe are for an optional leaf spring kit, are coming into contact with the lower forelinks. As a result, this truck is losing a bit of suspension travel in the front. Obviously, if you don't intend to convert this truck to leaf springs, it's probably a good idea to cut those parts off. It doesn't appear that they're their own separate pieces that you can just unscrew and remove from the frame rails. Unfortunately, it appears you will have to cut them off or at least grind them down a bit where they're coming into contact with the forelinks. Personally, I don't mind the undampened shocks. I enjoy seeing the truck bounce around while on the trails. Of course though, if you're going to be modifying this truck for better performance, a shock upgrade will probably be on the list of mods. But you can also choose to install a set of optional leaf springs sold separately by FMS. Between this truck and the Michigan, I have encountered a few issues with the string linkage, but I'll talk about that more in just a bit. Overall, a pretty solid platform, well suited for general trail driving, and can be upgraded if desired. It does lack some of the features seen on FMS's smaller scale platforms that I've reviewed prior, such as the FCX24 and FCX18. No 2-speed transmission or portal axles here, and I think the electronics included in those smaller scale rigs are a little better suited to those vehicles than the electronics they've chose to put in this FJ40, but of course the inclusion of such features would surely increase the cost. I had a blast cruising this thing around. It's relatively large and heavy, and considering its height and hard body, you definitely have to be careful not to roll it over. After filming these shots that you see here, I did take it over some slightly more challenging rocks and terrain, and it did impress me over a few obstacles, though of course make no mistake, this is definitely more of a trail truck than a crawler. Get it into the right environment though, and it will be a lot of fun to drive. I do think the experience is somewhat let down though by the stock electronics. Just like the Michigan, the drag brake is very harsh, and I don't see any way to adjust it. The stock steering servo is also a bit underpowered. For just about anything more serious than general trail driving, it will start to struggle. Modulation at lower speeds is decent, but not as good as some of the other FMS models when you put them in low gear. Top speed on 2S is maybe slightly faster than a walking pace. This ESC will let you use up to a 3S LiPo, which will increase the top speed, well beyond a comfortable walking pace, so a perfect truck for cruising down some trails while on a hike, but that drag brake sort of spoils the experience for me. Again, when I'm running one of the FCX series vehicles in high gear, I can quickly adjust the drag brake setting or even turn it off entirely right from the transmitter. Such a feature on one of these larger models from FMS would be awesome, but good things come to those who wait. Overall, a solid rig in stock form, but I think it could definitely benefit from some minor upgrades to really enhance the driving experience.
Alright, so I'm back from the trail. What a fun rig to cruise around with. Absolutely loving this thing already. However, it did leave me stranded. Well, okay, stranded's a strong word, but let me show you what happened. If you look right here, as you can see, the fastener used to secure this arm to the servo fell out while driving. It held up great all day. Fortunately, right at the very end is when it fell out. I'm very happy about that because this is not the lightest truck to carry. Of course, this is a very easy fix. I've just got like an M3, probably like an M3x6 fastener. We'll drive that right in there. And I'll use a little bit of Loctite this time just to make sure it doesn't fall out again. I want to point this out though, just to be a lesson, whether it be this vehicle or any other ready to run, really, make sure that you're checking all your fasteners before your first drive. Most manufacturers now are doing a great job of having these trucks well put together right out of the box. But no matter what vehicle, it's always a really good idea to go through it and make sure all of the fasteners are tight. It's so easy when you get a brand new rig to just want to dive right in and take it out for a drive. But I'm going to do the proper thing now. I'm going to do a once over, just making sure everything's tight. I'm also going to open up these diff covers and make sure there's some grease in there. They sound a little bit loud. I'm also going to use this as an opportunity to upgrade the steering servo arm. This is the stock plastic arm from the Rock Hobby Michigan, a very similar vehicle to this. The hole got stripped out and then the fastener fell out. On the Michigan, I ended up upgrading both the servo arm and the servo. I figured I might as well put a metal steering arm in its place just to prevent that from happening on this vehicle. Also, this is an offset arm. As you can see, it's going to sit down lower in the vehicle. And that should eliminate the need to use this spacer right here. I believe the stock servo is a 25 tooth. So if you're looking to upgrade, make sure you choose the 25 tooth, very common. Oh, also the front license plate fell off. Just got snagged on some tiny trees. No big deal at all. I ended up using glue the first time, but I see now they do give you some double-sided tape, so I'll try using that. There we go, now we're legal. So something I just noticed, and I don't think you'll really be able to see it on camera, but I'm looking at this and I see the nut up here, and I'm thinking back to the Michigan, and I'm wondering, did it have a nut up here? Because when that hole got wallowed out on the steering arm, This fastener just fell right out. But looking at it, I don't know if you can see down in there, but this nut is just barely holding on. There's barely any threads in there. So I'm not sure if they're all this way, but this fastener here needs to be a few millimeters longer so it can actually lock into the nut. Just an observation. Of course, I'm going to be correcting all of this on my vehicle, but let's see how many threads. Oh yeah. Not much. That's all that's going into this nut. Yeah, I must have lost the nut on the trail and just assumed that it threaded into the plastic. But if they had gone with just a slightly longer screw, yeah, it wouldn't have had that issue. All right, just an observation, thought I'd pass that information along to you. So yeah, definitely consider upgrading the arm. So it is actually threaded into the plastic. Again, they should have just used a slightly longer fastener. Then there would be no worries about this coming out. But of course, a metal arm is still a good upgrade. Remember, you might need a longer screw when you're putting in an offset servo arm. Perfect.
An easy fix, fortunately, and it's certainly something you might want to consider before taking your rig on an epic miles-long hike. If you don't want to upgrade the arm, at least install a slightly longer M3 fastener so you can get the threads to lock in on that nut. When I opened up the differential housings, I noticed the front had a little bit of grease and the rears had none, so I applied some grease, courtesy of the fine folks at Cow RC. I should probably check the transfer case at some point, but just getting some grease on the ring and pinion gears has quieted down the truck quite a bit.
Overall, I'm very impressed with this truck. As I'm sure you all know, I really enjoy the more scale-looking and highly detailed trucks such as this. FMS really did a great job with the body, and while I'm sure there's some room for improvement here and there, overall, especially considering the price, I really can't complain. So like with the Michigan, I know some people aren't a huge fan of the size of the body. While these are listed as 10 scale models, the bodies in reality are technically more like 1/7 scale. Personally, I don't really mind the fact that these bodies are a little larger. Sure, when you're running it with some other 10 scale models, it's going to look a little bit too large. However, these are 1/9 wheels with some pretty beefy tires, right? Yet they don't look huge on this truck. Because of that, you can run this truck on some slightly more challenging terrain than you could if this was a true 1/10 scale model. Basically, it lets us trail truck guys run with some of the more capable 1/10 scale crawlers, at least to a certain degree. That's sort of the way I look at it, but of course everybody is entitled to their opinion on the size. The body is awesome. The chassis, it's all right. So having put some miles on this platform now with the Michigan, that truck of course uses a basically identical chassis design. I have had a few minor issues related to the steering linkage, as I talked about earlier. A lot of times I find that the stock electronics on many of these ready-to-run crawlers are perfectly adequate for the type of driving I do. However, I really feel that on this truck, it needs some upgrades in that department. While what you have here stock is fine, and you can certainly have some fun with it, it just doesn't quite have the ability to slow crawl like on some other 10 scale ready-to-run crawlers I've reviewed prior, and that drag brake with no apparent adjustability is just way too strong. The throttle also seems really touchy, so it requires a lot of finesse to get anything close to a scale appearance when driving. I will say it does feel pretty beefy and pretty solid. All of the steering and suspension links are metal. I do really like how bouncy the suspension is out of the box. I know not everybody likes that, but to me it just looks cool driving down the trail with it sort of bouncing around. Not a bad platform by any means, and I know some people really like it. It's just compared to some similarly priced 10 scale ready-to-run crawlers I've driven, it doesn't seem quite on the same level. That said though, the body is certainly better than some of those similarly priced ready-to-run crawlers I've reviewed prior. And of course, really, I think that's the main reason why you would buy one of these. If you're a big fan of scale realism and are looking for a budget-priced hardbody truck and aren't afraid to do a few upgrades to enhance the driving experience, this rig is going to be hard to beat. Now do keep in mind that there are two similar trucks also made by FMS, though under their Rock Hobby brand, you may want to consider. Those being the Atlas and Michigan. Both utilize essentially the same chassis and have very good looking bodies. Neither one of those are officially licensed, but they are less expensive than this one here. For $350 US, I think it's a solid value. If you really want to elevate the driving experience though, be prepared to spend a little extra for some upgrades. Doesn't need to be top of the line, especially if you're just using this as a trail truck, but I think a little will go a long way in terms of the electronics. Also take note that an all-new 1/10 scale FMS product will be hitting the market soon. While that might be aimed at a slightly different buyer than this FJ40 here, if you're a 10th scale crawler fan, definitely stay tuned to this channel and make sure you're subscribed, as you'll be among the first to learn about this new release from FMS. No doubt though, this is one awesome rig. I'm not exactly sure what I'll be doing to this truck, but I know one thing I want to do is swap out these wheels. I've got an old school set of some steel wheels, and I think those are going to enhance the appearance even more. I'll definitely post some pictures on Instagram once those wheels are on. If you'd like to see an update video on this rig, maybe I can try out some relatively inexpensive electronics and see how much better the driving is, let me know below in the comments. But anyways, I really hope you found this video helpful. I want to thank FMS for sending this rig for review, and I will include a link to it below in the description if you're interested in purchasing one. And of course, a huge thanks to all of you for watching.